I was 32 years old when my own twin sister watched the paramedics zip the bag over my face, still wearing my dead fiancé's watch on her wrist like a trophy, and I was 7 years old again 3 seconds later, sitting cross-legged on a cold kitchen floor in Millbrook, Oregon, on the morning of March 2, 1998, the day before my parents decided which one of their daughters was worth keeping. I know how that sounds. I didn't believe it either, not at first. But I remembered everything, every betrayal, every dollar, every lie, and this time, I intended to use it. My name is Vivian Calloway. In my first life, I was the twin nobody wanted. My mother, Diane Calloway, used to say it like a fact of nature, the way you'd mention the weather. Josephine was always the strong one, she told a neighbor once, right in front of me, like I was furniture. Vivian was sickly. We couldn't keep them both. My father, Richard, a foreman at a lumber mill who drank his paycheck down to fumes by the 15th of every month, never argued with her. He just signed the paperwork. On March 3, 1998, they drove me to Sacred Heart Home for Children in Portland and left me on the front steps with a garbage bag of clothes and a stuffed rabbit missing one eye. My twin sister, Josephine, Josie, got to stay. She got the birthday parties, the piano lessons, the college fund. I got a bunk bed and a case number. I used to think that was the worst thing that would ever happen to me. I was wrong. The worst thing happened 25 years later, and it happened because I let myself believe people could change. I grew up in that orphanage angry and brilliant in equal measure. By 19 I had a full scholarship to Oregon State for structural engineering. By 28 I had my own architecture firm in Seattle, Callaway Design Group, worth $11 million and climbing. I built glass towers. I built my name into something that mattered. And in 2019, at a charity gala for the Pacific Northwest Housing Coalition, my mother found me again. She cried. She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she thought about me every day, that Richard had never forgiven himself. I was 30 years old and I wanted, more than anything I have ever wanted, for that to be true. So I let them back in. I paid off my father's medical debt, $63,000 for a hip replacement Medicare wouldn't fully cover. I bought my mother a Lexus RX. I funded Josie's boutique hotel project in Bend, Oregon, the Larkspur Inn, with $2 million of my own equity, because she cried too, and told me she'd always wished she'd fought harder for me as a kid, that she was just a scared little girl who didn't understand what our parents were doing. And I fell in love with a man named Marcus Doyle, a commercial real estate broker with a jaw like a magazine ad and a laugh that made rooms feel warmer. I introduced him to my family at Thanksgiving in 2021. I put a ring on my finger that cost $42,000 in April of 2023. By September of that year, Marcus was sleeping with Josie in the back office of the Larkspur Inn, the hotel I had paid for. By October, my mother was quietly forging my signature on a shareholder transfer, moving 40% of Callaway Design Group into a trust controlled by my father. By November, I was dead. They called it a diabetic emergency. I wasn't diabetic. My private investigator, a sharp, tired man named Frank Nash who I'd hired 18 months earlier when Josie's spending stopped adding up, had insulin-adjacent findings in a toxicology report he never got to finish sending me, because I collapsed at my own engagement dinner on November 14, 2023. After eating a slice of chocolate torte my mother had personally cut for me. I remember Josie's face as I went down. She wasn't scared. She was relieved. And then I woke up on a kitchen floor in 1998, 7 years old, with 25 years of memory sitting behind my eyes like a loaded gun. I don't know what kind of mercy or curse gave me that morning back. I only know the rule, because I tested it in every way a child can test something. I remembered all of it, every year, every dollar, every lie yet to be told, and nobody else remembered anything at all. My mother was standing at the stove that morning making eggs, exactly as young and exactly as tired as she'd been the first time. My father was in the next room, silent, reading the paper he could barely afford. And across from me, kicking her feet against the table leg, humming some cartoon theme song, was Josephine. 7 years old. Golden-haired. Innocent. In the specific way that children are innocent right up until the moment someone teaches them not to be. I looked at my sister's small, careless face and felt something in my chest go very, very cold. I was done being the twin they kept out of guilt and discarded the moment it was convenient. This time, I decided, sitting on that kitchen floor with a spoonful of egg halfway to my mouth, I would be the one who stayed, and Josephine would learn exactly what worthless felt like. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A 7-year-old throwing a tantrum gets nothing. A 7-year-old who is quiet, helpful, and quietly excellent gets chosen. Over the next 12 months, I became indispensable in ways a 7-year-old shouldn't be able to manage, and Josie, without me doing a single cruel thing to her directly, became a problem. I happened to mention to our mother that Josie had thrown up twice that week. True, because I'd watched her sneak candy from Mrs. Halloran's jar and knew her stomach for sweets was weak. I happened to draw a picture of our family with careful, obedient detail, while Josie scribbled hairs in 5 minutes and asked to go play. I did the dishes without being asked. I remembered, because I remembered everything, that our father's mood soured badly whenever the electric bill ran high, so I turned off lights in rooms nobody was using, at age 7, and let him notice. None of it was revenge yet. It was seeding. On March 3, 1999, 1 year after the day I'd once been driven to Sacred Heart, I sat at the kitchen table doing multiplication tables for fun while Josie complained she was bored and wanted a dog. My mother, exhausted, broke, staring down the barrel of a decision she and my father had never really made peace with the first time either, looked at me and said, quietly, to my father, "Maybe it's Josephine who needs more help than we thought." I didn't smile. Smiling would have been a mistake. I just kept writing my numbers. They sent Josephine to Sacred Heart Home for Children on March 9, 1999. I remember watching from the porch as my father's truck pulled away with her small shape in the passenger seat, her face turned back toward the house, confused and betrayed in a way she had no language for yet. I felt nothing that resembled joy. I felt the particular, focused stillness of a debt finally being logged. I want to be honest about something, because the version of this story that makes me a hero would be a lie. I did not save Josie from anything. I let her live the exact childhood she let me live in another timeline, down to the case number. I told myself it was justice. Maybe it was just arithmetic. I grew up as the kept twin this time, the strong one, the smart one, the one my mother bragged about at church. And I used every single year of it like a tool. I got the scholarship. I got the internship. I built Callaway Design Group again, brick by brick, this time with my eyes open from the very first contract I signed. I hired Frank Nash again, in 2015, 8 years earlier than last time, before I needed him rather than after. I told him exactly what to watch for: financial irregularities, family members with sudden interest in my accounts, anyone asking about beneficiary designations. I hired a lawyer named Priya Okafor out of Portland, sharp as a scalpel, and had her draft ironclad operating agreements for my company before I ever let a dime near my family. Every gift I gave my parents after that, and I gave them plenty, because trust has to look real to be useful, went through a formal loan structure with Priya's signature on it, not a gift. Every dollar was a leash, and they never noticed the collar. In 2021, my mother tracked me down at a gallery opening, the same gala, the same tears, the same speech about regret. This time I already knew every word before she said it. I let her cry. I hugged her. And I recorded the entire conversation on a phone in my coat pocket, because I remembered, from the first life, exactly how useful her guilt would eventually become as evidence of intent. Josephine, aged 23, aged out of the system with nothing but a GED and a chip on her shoulder the exact size and shape of the one I used to carry. She found me through our mother in 2022. She didn't apologize for anything, because in her memory, there was nothing to apologize for. She was the wronged one now, and she played the role with a conviction that almost impressed me. "You have everything," she told me over coffee at a shop in Pearl District, Seattle, mascara smudged with practiced precision. And I had nothing. "Don't you feel like you owe me something?" I did feel something. I felt the specific, surgical satisfaction of watching a person hand you the exact knife you intended to hand them. "I'll help you," I said. "I'll invest in something real. A business. Something that's yours." She cried again, relief, this time, not performance, though with Josie the line was thin. In March of 2023, I funded the Larkspur Inn in Bend, Oregon, with $2 million, structured as a convertible note through Priya's firm, with covenants that gave me audit rights and a board seat. Josie didn't read past the signature line. Neither had I, in the version of events where I trusted her. I met Marcus Doyle at a real estate mixer in April of 2023, 9 months earlier than the first time, because I sought him out this time, deliberately, the way you'd bait a trap. In my first life, he'd found me. This time, I found him, and I let him think he was choosing me. He was exactly as charming as I remembered, and I let that charm wash over me in public and mean absolutely nothing to me in private. I got engaged to him on schedule, October 2023, ring included, because the ring mattered less than the paper trail. What I didn't do was give him access to anything. Not my accounts, not my shares, not my trust documents. Frank Nash had a man watching the Larkspur Inn's back office by August, a retired Bend PD detective named Carlo Strowski who did private security work on the side and owed Frank a favor from a case in 2009. By September, I had photographs. By October, I had recordings. Marcus and Josie, in the Larkspur's back office, on the desk I had paid for, talking about how much easier things would be once the paperwork went through. My mother's voice on a separate recording, coaching Josie, she trusts you. Use that. She's always wanted you to love her. I sat in my apartment in Seattle in November of 2023 and listened to that recording 4 times. I did not cry. I remember specifically noting that I did not cry, and finding that fact more informative than any of the betrayal itself. Here is where the old me would have confronted them. Screamed, thrown the ring, called the police that same night. That woman died once already, and dying teaches you that rage spends fast and buys nothing. I chose the long game instead. I let the engagement continue through November and December of 2023, the exact window in which, in my first life, my mother had begun forging shareholder documents. This time, Priya Okafor had already locked every share of Callaway Design Group behind an irrevocable trust that made forgery legally meaningless, and I let my mother try anyway, because attempted forgery of a company document is a federal wire fraud predicate the moment it crosses a state line by email, and my mother, bless her greed, attached the falsified transfer document to an email sent from Oregon to my company's registered agent in Delaware. I didn't need her to succeed. I needed her to try, on the record. Marcus proposed a wedding loan to me in January of 2024. Could I front $180,000 for a venue deposit and vendor contracts? He'd pay me back after the ceremony. In my first life, I'd wired it in an afternoon. This time, I told him I needed a few days to move funds. Instead, I called Carlo Strowski, who confirmed the venue Marcus named, the Aldergrove estate outside Bend, had no record of any deposit conversation with a Marcus Doyle. Marcus was building a fake wedding to extract cash before the real plan, my death, went into motion. I did not give him the money. I did something colder. I let him keep believing I would. I brought in one more piece, the piece that made everything after possible. His name was Adrian Voss, a hotel and hospitality investor out of San Francisco who I'd met legitimately, through work, in 2022, a broad-shouldered, quiet man who had built and sold 3 boutique hospitality brands and had exactly 0 patience for grifters, because his own younger brother had been fleeced out of a restaurant chain by a business partner in 2015. When I told Adrian, carefully, over months, never all at once, never looking for sympathy, what I suspected about the Larkspur Inn's finances, he didn't ask me what I wanted him to do. He asked to see the numbers. Adrian had his own forensic accountant, a woman named Renata Kolsky who had spent 9 years at the Oregon Department of Justice's Financial Crimes Unit before going private, combed through the Larkspur's books in February of 2024. What she found wasn't subtle once someone competent looked. Josie had been siphoning guest deposits into a personal account for 18 months, roughly $340,000 total, to fund a lifestyle, designer bags, a leased BMW, cash gifts to our mother, that the Larkspur's actual revenue could never have supported. My parents had been receiving those cash gifts and reporting none of it. My convertible note gave me audit rights. Adrian's capital gave me leverage. Renata's report gave me proof. I didn't call the police in February. I waited for the moment they'd trapped themselves completely, the same way they'd once let me sit quietly in a kitchen while they decided my fate. Patience, I'd learned, was the only revenge that never backfires. In March of 2024, 26 years, almost to the day, since my father's truck first pulled away from Sacred Heart's front steps with a different daughter in the passenger seat, the Larkspur Inn defaulted on a supplier payment for $58,000. Josie, panicking, went to our parents for cash. Our parents, panicking in turn, tried a wire transfer of $95,000 out of a joint account they didn't fully understand was already flagged, using funds my mother had borrowed from a home equity line taken out against the house I had, in an earlier act of trust one now viewed with clinical detachment, helped them pay off in 2021. The bank flagged it. Their loan officer, a stiff, by-the-books woman named Carol Fennick at Umpqua Bank, froze the line pending review. The same week Adrian's legal team quietly filed a civil complaint against the Larkspur-Inn's ownership for breach of the note covenants, and, because Renata's findings crossed the threshold into criminal territory, a referral landed on the desk of a Deschutes County financial crimes detective named Thomas Reyes. The collapse, when it came all at once, exactly the way collapses always do to people who built their whole lives on skimming just a little more than they were owed. I remember standing outside the Larkspur Inn on the morning of April 19, 2024, the day the sheriff's office posted the foreclosure and lien notices on the front door, and thinking about a different porch, 26 years earlier, where a different set of papers had ended a different childhood. The building was the same kind of building, white trim, hopeful shutters, and the people standing on the steps looking lost were, this time, not me. My mother stood in the parking lot in a coat that used to be my gift to her, watching a locksmith change the locks on a business she'd helped bankrupt. My father sat in his truck, the same truck, functionally, 26 years older, because his license had been suspended after a DUI in January that nobody had bothered mentioning to me, and he had nowhere else to be. Josie wasn't there at all. Josie was in an interview room at the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office with Detective Reyes, being asked to account for $340,000 that no longer existed anywhere except in cocktail dresses and a leased BMW that had already been repossessed. Marcus never faced charges. He'd been careful enough to keep his hands technically clean of the embezzlement, though not careful enough to avoid the wedding fraud paper trail Carlo Strowski had built. I ended the engagement by certified letter through Priya Okafor's office in May, along with a formal demand for repayment of the $180,000 loan he'd never actually received, structured that way specifically so his lie about needing it would exist in writing, dated, notarized, useless to him and devastating to any future woman who might have Googled his name and found the court filing. The final confrontation happened on June 6, 2024, in a conference room at Priya Okafor's law office in downtown Portland. Beige walls, a pitcher of water nobody touched, my mother's hands shaking around a cup of coffee she'd asked for and hadn't drunk. "You did this," my mother said, the moment the door closed, before anyone else had spoken. "You set us up. You had that man watching us." "I invested in a business," I said. My voice came out level, almost bored. "Josephine stole from it. You tried to forge documents to cover a loan you couldn't repay. Nobody set anyone up. You just finally got caught doing what you've always done." "We're your family." My father, who had not looked at me directly in 6 months, finally did. His eyes were red. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I thought about a garbage bag with a one-eyed rabbit inside it. I thought about a chocolate torte. I thought, briefly and clinically, about how strange it was that this was the 4th time in 2 lifetimes I'd sat across from these 2 people and heard some version of that sentence. "It used to," I said. "You spent that a long time ago. You just don't remember which day." Josie arrived late, out on bail her public defender had barely secured, mascara gone entirely this time, no performance left in her, just a 28-year-old woman staring at the wreckage of a life she genuinely believed had been stolen from her twice. "You let them send me back," she said. Her voice cracked. "The orphanage. You knew what that place was like. You let them do it to me." I looked at her for a long moment. There was a version of me, the woman who died at that engagement dinner with a fork still in her hand, who might have felt something crack open at that. That woman was gone. What remained was colder, and clearer, and entirely at peace with the arithmetic. "I know exactly what that place is like," I said. "I lived it. Nobody explained it to me either. Nobody softened it. You'll survive it, the same way I did. Whether you become someone worth knowing afterward, that part's up to you, not me. You're supposed to be my sister." "I was," I said. "For a long time, in a life you don't remember, I would have done anything for you. You should be grateful you don't remember what that cost me." I stood up. Priya slid the final settlement documents across the table, repayment terms on the note, restitution structured to satisfy the criminal court, releases that protected me from any future claim any of them might dream up. My mother signed with a hand that shook so badly the signature barely resembled her name. My father didn't speak again. Josie signed last, staring at the page like it belonged to someone else's life. I walked out of that conference room into a June afternoon in Portland, and Adrian Voss was waiting for me on the sidewalk, exactly where he said he'd be, not because he needed to protect me. I'd stopped needing protecting somewhere around age 7, the second time, but because he wanted to be there when it ended. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about the question honestly, which is rarer than people assume, even in your own head. "Even," I said. "We built something real after that, not out of rescue, because I didn't need one, but out of two people who'd both learned, the hard way, what it costs to trust the wrong hands with something you built yourself." Callaway Design Group broke $30 million in valuation by the end of 2025. My parents lost the house in Millbrook to the bank in the fall of 2024. Josie served 14 months at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility and came out to a world that had moved on entirely without her, exactly the way mine had moved on without me, once. I didn't visit her there. I didn't send money. I sent, exactly once, a single envelope with no letter inside, just a photocopy of the intake form from Sacred Heart Home for Children, dated March 9, 1999, her name typed at the top in a stranger's careless handwriting. I let her sit with that the way I once had to sit with mine. Some people are going to say I became just like the people who hurt me. Maybe. But I think there's a difference between cruelty that comes from love being exploited, and cruelty that's simply arithmetic settled at last. I didn't lie to anyone. I didn't forge a single document. I just stopped protecting people who'd already shown me, twice now, exactly what they'd do with my trust the moment it was profitable. You don't get reborn to become soft. You get reborn to finally do the math correctly. I burned down nothing. I just stopped putting the fire out on their behalf. If this story of family betrayal and cold, calculated payback kept you hooked, hit like, share it with someone who loves a plot twist, and subscribe for more reborn drama stories.